I should have told someone about the handprints the first time I saw them. My name is Hector Ruiz, and I have worked as a groundskeeper at Meadowbrook County Cemetery in Riverside, California for 17 years. In that time, I have learned that cemeteries follow patterns. Grass grows at predictable rates, headstones settle in expected ways. The soil tells you what happened during the night: animals, weather, vandals. Everything leaves a mark you can read if you know how to look. Row 9. C doesn't follow patterns anymore. We stopped using that section in 2008. It's part of the old Potter's Field, where the county buries people with no family, no money, no one to claim them. Most of the graves there have small metal markers with numbers instead of names. Some don't even have that. The records from the 1970s and 80s are incomplete. Fire at the county records building. Whole decades of burials reduced to guesswork and faded carbon paper. I mow every section of Meadowbrook except row 9C. I trim around every grave, edge every pathway, rake every plot. But I haven't touched row 9C in 4 months. It started in late September. I was doing my usual morning rounds, walking the perimeter before the first viewing of the day. The sun was just coming up, that pale gold light that makes the dew look like frost. I walked past row 9C on my way to the maintenance shed and saw them. Handprints, pressed into the dirt above an unmarked plot. Small ones, child-sized. The fingers were spread wide, like someone had been pushing themselves up from beneath the soil. The prints were fresh, deep enough that I could see the individual creases in the palms. I stopped walking, looked around. The cemetery was empty. No footprints leading to the grave. No footprints leading away. Just those two small handprints, centered perfectly above where a casket would rest. I checked the plot number against my records. No marker, no registration, just a faded stake with R9C14 written in permanent marker. I told myself it was a prank. Kids sometimes jump the fence at night, but there were no other tracks. No disturbed grass, no bicycle tire marks on the pathway, just those prints. I raked them smooth and went about my day. The next morning, they were back. Same spot, same size, same depth. The dirt I'd raked flat was pressed down again in two perfect handprints. I stood there for a long time, looking at them. The maintenance shed radio was playing oldies. Somewhere in the distance, a sprinkler system clicked on. Normal sounds, normal morning. I raked them smooth again. They appeared every single morning for a week. I started arriving earlier, 5 a.m., 4:30, 4. I walked row 9C with a flashlight, checking every hour. The ground was always undisturbed during my rounds, but by sunrise, the handprints were there, fresh, waiting. I called the county records office, asked about R9C14. The clerk put me on hold for 20 minutes while she searched the archives. When she came back, her voice was different, quieter. That plot was used in 1973, she said. Stillborn, no name registered, no service recorded. The mother was listed as Jane Doe. She died during delivery. I asked if there were any surviving family members, anyone who might visit. No next of kin, she said. That's why the burial was county funded. It says here the mother was unidentified. They're both in that plot. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I stayed late. I parked my truck at the far end of the cemetery and walked to row 9C just before midnight. The moon was bright enough to see by. I sat down on a bench near the section and waited. The hours passed slowly. 1 a.m., 2, 3. The cemetery was silent, except for the wind moving through the oak trees near the chapel. I watched row 9C the entire time. Nothing. At 4:15, I checked my phone. When I looked up, the handprints were there. I hadn't looked away for more than 5 seconds. But there they were, pressed into the dirt, small and deliberate, and impossibly fresh. I walked over to the plot, knelt down. The soil was still settling, like it had just been touched. I reached out to feel the edge of one print. The dirt was cold, colder than it should have been. I pulled my hand back. That's when I heard it. A sound from beneath the ground, soft, rhythmic, like someone patting soil from underneath. Pat, pat, pat. Not frantic, not desperate, just persistent, steady, the way a child might knock on a door when they want to be let in. I stood up fast. The sound stopped. I haven't touched row 9C since. The handprints still appear every morning. Same spot, same size. I've stopped raking them smooth. What's the point? They'll be back by dawn. Other groundskeepers have started asking why I avoid that section. I tell them the soil's bad there. Drainage issues. They accept it. Nobody questions me too closely. We all have sections we don't like working. Last week, I saw something else. I was trimming near row 8C, one section over, and I glanced toward the unmarked plot. There were 3 handprints this time, 2 small ones, one larger, adult-sized. I reported it to the cemetery director, told him we might have a vandalism problem. He walked out there with me, looked at the prints, and shrugged. Probably an animal, he said. Raccoon, maybe. They dig around out here. I didn't argue. This morning, I found a 4th print, smaller than the others, newer. The dirt around it looked like it had been smoothed carefully, the way you'd tuck a blanket around someone sleeping. I called the coroner's office, asked if it was possible for remains that old to shift, to move. He laughed and said no. Bone doesn't migrate. Soil settles down, not up. I didn't tell him why I was asking. I'm writing this during my lunch break. I can see row 9C from the shed window. The handprints are still there. 4 of them now, arranged in a half circle around the plot, like people kneeling. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they want anything, but I know this. I won't be the one to disturb that grave. Some places are meant to stay quiet. Row 9C isn't one of them anymore. I've worked with the dead long enough to know they don't change expressions. My name is Jude Callahan, and I have been a licensed embalmer at Riverside Memorial Services in Portland, Oregon for 12 years. In that time, I have prepared over 800 bodies for viewing. I understand rigor mortis. I understand facial setting. I understand that once you position a face, lock the jaw, seal the features, they stay that way. The dead don't smile, they don't frown, they don't move. Until the morning I walked into prep room 2 and found him grinning. The case came in on a Tuesday. Male, 74 years old, massive stroke, found in his apartment 3 weeks after death. No family, no emergency contacts. The landlord discovered him when neighbors complained about the smell. The police report listed him as John Doe, number 447. No identification, no wallet, no photos. Just an old man who died alone and wasn't found until the decomposition made it impossible to ignore. The county funded the burial, bare minimum service, no viewing, direct cremation after a 48-hour hold for identification purposes. My job was simple: preserve the remains long enough for the state to exhaust their search for next of kin, then release him to the crematory. When they brought him in, his face was locked in neutral rigor, mouth closed, eyes sunken but unremarkable, the expression you see in probably 70% of stroke victims: slack, empty, like someone had turned off a light mid-sentence. I photographed him for the file. Standard procedure. Took his measurements. Began the arterial prep. The embalming went normally. I worked through the afternoon, finishing just before 6. Before I left, I checked his face one final time. Still neutral, still slack. I made a note in his file. Facial features stable, ready for holding. Then I locked the prep room and went home. The next morning, I came in early to finish the paperwork. I needed to photograph him again, post-embalming documentation for the county. I unlocked prep room 2, turned on the lights, and pulled back the sheet. His mouth had changed. Not much, just enough. The corners of his lips had lifted slightly, a faint upward curve, like he'd heard something amusing in the night. I stood there staring at him, checked my notes, checked the photographs from the day before. In the intake photo, his mouth was a flat line. Now it curved. I told myself I'd made a mistake. Maybe I hadn't positioned his jaw correctly. Maybe the rigor had shifted during the night. It happens sometimes with incomplete embalming. Though I'd done a full arterial flush, his tissue had been saturated. There was no reason for post-mortem movement. I adjusted his face, used cotton and a setting compound to return his expression to neutral, checked it twice, locked the prep room, went about my day. That night, I stayed late to finish another case. Around 9, I walked past prep room 2 on my way out. I don't know why I stopped. I don't know why I unlocked the door. But I did. I pulled back the sheet. The grin was wider, not subtle anymore. A full smile now. Lips pulled back enough to show the edges of his teeth, the expression you'd see on someone who just won a private joke. His eyes were still closed, still sunken, but his mouth, God, his mouth looked alive. I grabbed my phone, took a photo, compared it to the morning's documentation. The change was undeniable. In 12 hours, his face had shifted from neutral to smiling, a deliberate, pronounced grin. I reset his face again. This time, I used wire, ran it through his jaw, anchored it to the base of his skull. Medical grade retention, the kind of setting we use for open casket viewings when we need the features to hold for days. I worked for an hour, making absolutely certain his expression was locked in place. I photographed the results. Neutral expression. Documented everything. Locked the prep room. I came back at midnight. I told myself I was being paranoid. Told myself I'd double check and then go home and sleep and stop imagining things. But when I unlocked that door and turned on the light, I knew. The wire was still in place. The jaw was still anchored, but the grin had come back. Wider than before, wide enough that I could see his gums. His lips were stretched tight across his teeth in a rictus that looked almost painful. The wire hadn't moved. The setting compound was intact, but somehow, impossibly, his face had changed around it. I stood in that doorway for 5 minutes, just staring. My training said this wasn't possible. Embalmed tissue doesn't move. Wired jaws don't shift. Dead men don't grin. But he was grinning. I called my supervisor, woke him up, told him I needed him to come in and verify something. He was annoyed, but he came. 40 minutes later, he stood next to me in prep room 2, looking at the body. "What's the problem?" he asked. I pointed at the face. "Look at his expression." He looked, frowned, checked the file. "Says here you did a neutral set." "I did, 3 times." "Doesn't look neutral to me," he said. "Looks like you missed the rigger window. It happens. Just reset it and move him to cold storage. Cremation's scheduled for tomorrow anyway." He left. I stared at the body. I didn't reset the face. I couldn't touch it. Instead, I moved him to the cold storage unit, locked the door, and went home. The cremation happened the next afternoon. I wasn't there. I asked another technician to handle the transfer. He called me an hour later. "Hey, Jude," he said. "Did you see this guy's face?" My stomach dropped. "What about it?" "He's got this weird expression, like he's laughing at something." I hung up. The body was cremated at 3 p.m. I watched from the office window as they loaded the cremation container into the retort. I stayed until the process was finished, until there was nothing left but ash and bone fragments. That night, I went back to prep room 2. I needed to clean it. Standard protocol after a case. I unlocked the door, turned on the light, and stopped. On the stainless steel table where he'd been lying, someone had traced a face in the condensation, a simple sketch. 2 dots for eyes, a curved line for a mouth. Grinning, I wiped it away immediately, cleaned the entire room with bleach, checked the security footage. No one had entered that room since the body was removed. I've handled 6 more cases since then, all routine, all normal, but every time I lock a jaw, every time I set a face, I check it twice, 3 times. I photograph everything, and sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in the facility, I think I hear it. Laughter, soft and distant, and coming from nowhere at all. I never found out who he was. The state gave up searching after 30 days. No one claimed him. No one came forward. He went into the ground as John Doe, number 447, a man without a name, without a history, without anyone to remember him. But I remember him. I remember the grin, and I absolutely know, that wherever he is now, he's still smiling. Every cemetery has ghosts. I just never thought I'd have proof. My name is David Chen, and I have been the managing director of Willowbrook Cemetery in Springfield, Massachusetts for 9 years. Before that, I worked in cemetery operations for another decade. I've heard every story, every legend, every supposed haunting. Visitors claim they see figures in the fog. Groundskeepers swear they hear voices at dawn. Security guards report shadows that don't match any living person. I've always nodded politely and checked the footage. It's always fog, always wind, always nothing. Until I reviewed the recordings from Plot 47. We installed the infrared security system 2 years ago after a vandalism incident. 6 cameras covering the main sections, motion activated, thermal imaging capable. The system flags unusual activity and saves it to a cloud server. Mostly we get animals. Deer crossing through at night, raccoons nosing around the older sections, occasionally a teenager jumping the fence. The alert for Plot 47 came through on a Thursday morning in October. Motion detected at 2:03 a.m. I was reviewing the week's footage over coffee when I saw it. A figure kneeling at the grave. The image was clear. A person, small frame, kneeling in front of the headstone with their head bowed, hands folded in their lap, the posture of prayer or grief. They stayed there for exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Then they stood, turned, and walked out of frame. I rewound it, watched it again. The motion was fluid, natural, a person visiting a grave in the middle of the night. Unusual, but not impossible. We have family members who come at odd hours. Grief doesn't follow a schedule. I made a note to check if we'd had any after-hours access requests for that plot. Then I scrubbed forward to see if the person appeared on any other cameras. Nothing. They should have passed camera 3 on the eastern pathway. Should have triggered camera 5 near the main gate, but there was no record of them entering or leaving the property. I went back to the original footage, watched it frame by frame. That's when I noticed. The figure was moving, kneeling, clearly present in the frame, but the thermal overlay showed nothing. No heat signature. The infrared sensor, which picks up body temperature and displays it as a bright white outline, showed only the cold blue of the surrounding air. A living person generates heat. Always, even in October, even in the cold, a human body registers at 98.6 degrees. The camera should have lit them up like a beacon, but the thermal read was empty. I checked the camera diagnostics. No malfunction. The system was working perfectly. In the same footage, I could see a fox passing through the frame 20 minutes earlier, its heat signature clear and bright. But the person at Plot 47? Nothing. I saved the file, cross-referenced it with our burial records. Plot 47 held Jane Doe, buried in 1983. No identification, no next of kin found in the river, cause of death undetermined. The county funded the burial. A small granite marker with only a number and the year, no name, no dates, no inscription. No one had visited that grave in 9 years, not since I'd started working here. I checked the old logbooks. No recorded visits before that either. I went to the plot that afternoon. It looked like every other grave in that section. The grass was trimmed. The marker was clean. No flowers, No offerings, nothing to suggest anyone had been there recently. I set up a motion alert specifically for Plot 47. If anyone came back, I'd know immediately. The alert triggered again the following Thursday. 2:04 a.m. I was home when my phone buzzed. I pulled up the live feed. The figure was there, same posture, same position, kneeling in front of the marker with their head bowed. I watched in real time as they stayed for 4 minutes, then stood and walked away. The thermal red stayed empty, just the cold blue background. No heat, no body temperature, no living presence. I drove to the cemetery. It took me 12 minutes. When I arrived, the gates were locked. No signs of entry. I walked to Plot 47 with a flashlight. The ground in front of the marker was undisturbed. No footprints, no compressed grass. But when I knelt down and touched the soil, it was cold, colder than the surrounding earth, cold enough that I pulled my hand back. I checked the footage every week after that. Every Thursday at approximately 2 a.m., the figure appeared. Same grave, same posture, same 4-minute duration, never more, never less. I showed the footage to our head groundskeeper. He watched it twice, then handed my phone back without a word. Motion sensor glitch, he said. The fox shows up on thermal, I said. The deer show up. Everything living shows up, except this. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, maybe it's not living. I started keeping a log. Every Thursday, I documented the appearance. 2 a.m., 4 minutes and 17 seconds. No heat signature, no physical evidence. In December, I decided to be there in person. I parked outside the cemetery at 1:30 a.m. on a Thursday and walked to Plot 47. I positioned myself behind a large oak tree about 20 feet from the grave. I could see the marker clearly in the moonlight. At 2 a.m., I waited. 2:05, 2:10, nothing. I checked my phone. The motion alert hadn't triggered. I walked to the grave. The ground was frozen. The marker was dark. I stood there for 10 minutes, then walked back to my car. When I got home, I checked the security footage. The figure had been there. 2:03 a.m., 4 minutes and 17 seconds, kneeling at the grave while I stood 20 feet away, watching an empty plot. I'd been looking right at it, right at the spot where the camera showed a person kneeling, and I'd seen nothing. I stopped trying to witness it in person after that. I just watched the footage. Every Thursday, every 2 a.m., the same loop, the same 4 minutes. Last month, I contacted the detective who'd handled the Jane Doe case in '83. He was retired, living in Florida. I asked him if there'd been any leads, any family members who'd come forward. One person, he said. Daughter, she called 6 months after the burial, said she'd been looking for her mother for years, gave us a positive ID from a photo, but by the time we tried to follow up, the number was disconnected. We never heard from her again. Did you get a name? I asked. Yeah, he said. Hold on. I heard papers rustling. Here it is. Melanie Graves, 27 at the time. She wanted to know where her mother was buried. Did you tell her? I gave her the plot number, 47. I remember because she cried when I told her. Said she'd been searching for 2 years. I thanked him and hung up. That Thursday, I watched the footage again. The figure appeared at 2:03, knelt at the grave, stayed for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. This time, I didn't focus on the thermal overlay. I focused on the figure itself, the way they held their hands, the shape of their shoulders, the tilt of their head. It looked like someone saying goodbye. The footage still triggers every Thursday. I've stopped investigating, stopped documenting. I just check to make sure the alert came through, then close the file. Some visitors don't need warmth to be real. Some grief doesn't end when the body does. Plot 47 gets a visitor every week, right on schedule, and I've learned not to question what the camera sees. Because whether she's there or not, someone is kneeling at that grave, and they're not ready to stop. I've transported over 1,000 bodies, and I've never seen one walk. My name is Salvador Reyes, and I have worked as a mortuary transport driver for Crestview Funeral Services in Tucson, Arizona for 14 years. My job is simple: pick up the deceased from hospitals, nursing homes, private residences, and bring them to our facility for preparation. I drive a white transit van with no markings. I work alone. I've learned to be efficient, respectful, and invisible. The families don't want to see me. They don't want to know the logistics. They just want their loved one handled with dignity. I handle hundreds of pickups every year: heart attacks, strokes, old age, accidents. It's all routine. You check the paperwork, verify the identity, transfer the body to your gurney, secure it, and drive. You don't think about who they were. You don't imagine their lives. You just do the work. But there was one pickup I can't stop thinking about. The call came in on a Tuesday evening in March. County hospital, male, 62 years old, homeless veteran, no next of kin. Died of exposure after sleeping outside during an unusual cold snap. The hospital social worker gave me the details over the phone. She sounded tired. She'd probably made a dozen calls trying to find family before giving up and calling us. I arrived at the hospital just after 8 p.m., parked in the loading bay, checked in with the morgue attendant. Standard procedure. He walked me to the refrigeration unit, pulled out the drawer, and I verified the tag. John Doe, patient identification number 774-3. Estimated age 60 to 65. No personal effects, no identification. He was wearing a hospital gown. Thin, older man, white hair, deep lines around his eyes. His hands were rough, weathered. You could tell he'd lived hard. The kind of hands that spoke to decades of outdoor work or survival. I transferred him to my gurney, covered him with a sheet, and wheeled him toward the service elevator. The hospital was quiet. Night shift. Most of the lights were dimmed in the hallways. I took the elevator down to the ground floor and wheeled the gurney through the back corridor toward the loading bay exit. That's when I passed the waiting room. It's a small area near the emergency department entrance. 6 chairs, a vending machine, a television mounted on the wall playing the news with no sound. I glanced in as I walked past. Someone was sitting there. I stopped. It was him. Same white hair, same weathered face, same hospital gown, sitting in the second chair from the door, hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead at the intake desk. I looked down at my gurney. The sheet was still in place, covering the body. I could see the shape of his feet beneath the fabric. He was still there, still on the gurney. I looked back at the waiting room. The man in the chair didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, staring at nothing. I stood in that hallway for what felt like an entire minute, but was probably 10 seconds. My brain was trying to process what I was seeing. My eyes moved from the gurney to the waiting room and back again. Body on gurney, man in chair, same person. Impossible. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, looked again. The chair was empty. I pushed the gurney out to the van as fast as I could without running, loaded the body, secured the straps, got in the driver's seat, and locked the doors. My hands were shaking. I sat there in the parking lot, breathing hard, telling myself I'd imagined it. 14 years of night shifts, 14 years of picking up bodies in dimly lit hospital corridors. Your mind plays tricks. You see shadows. You hear things. I'd probably been working too many hours. Hadn't slept well. Stress, fatigue, a trick of the light. I drove back to the funeral home, transferred the body to our cold storage, filled out the paperwork, tried to forget about it, but I couldn't. That night, I went home and didn't sleep. I kept seeing him sitting in that chair, the stillness of his posture, the way he'd been staring at the intake desk, like he was waiting to be called. The next morning, I asked the funeral director if we'd had any issues with the John Doe from the county hospital. He checked the file. No, he said. Why? Just making sure the paperwork was complete, I said. He looked at me. You okay? Fine, I said. Just tired. 2 days later, we held the county-funded service. Bare minimum, no viewing, just a graveside committal with a chaplain and 2 groundskeepers. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway. I don't know why. I needed to see it through, I guess. The chaplain said a few words. They lowered the casket. I stood at the back of the small gathering and watched. That's when I saw her, an elderly woman in a black coat, standing about 20 feet away, near a large oak tree. She wasn't part of our group. She was just standing there, watching. Her face was expressionless. She held a folded piece of paper in her hands. After the service ended, I walked over to her. Did you know him? I asked. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. I should have come sooner, she said. Were you family? I didn't know where he was, she said. I've been looking for 3 years. By the time I found him, he was already gone. She handed me the piece of paper. It was a missing persons flyer, photocopied, worn at the edges, a photograph of a younger man with white hair and weathered hands, the same face I'd seen in the waiting room. The name on the flyer was Michael Graves. He was my brother, she said. He had PTSD, stopped taking his medication, disappeared. I hired investigators, checked shelters, hospitals, nothing. And now, she trailed off. I didn't know what to say. I handed the flyer back to her. I'm sorry, I said. She nodded, folded the paper carefully, and put it in her coat pocket. Then she walked away. I stood there for a long time after she left, looking at the grave, thinking about what I'd seen in the hospital. He'd been sitting in the waiting room, waiting to be found, waiting for someone to come, and by the time she did, he was already dead. I've done hundreds of pickups since then. I pass through hospital corridors every week. I see waiting rooms all the time, empty chairs, vending machines, televisions playing silent news. But now, whenever I walk past a waiting room, I look. I look to see if anyone is sitting there who shouldn't be. I look to see if they're staring at the intake desk. I look to see if they're waiting for someone who will never call their name. Most of the time, the chairs are empty. Most of the time. But there was one night last month when I picked up a case from the same county hospital. Different patient, different circumstances. I wheeled the gurney past the same waiting room and glanced in. The second chair from the door. Someone was sitting there. I didn't stop. I didn't look closer. I just kept walking because I know now what I didn't know before. Some people wait even after they're gone. Some people sit in those chairs long after their names have been forgotten. And I'm just the driver. I'm not supposed to see them, but I do. Some graves are meant to stay forgotten. My name is Albert Kowalski, and I have worked as a cemetery caretaker at Pinewood Memorial Gardens in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, for 23 years. I trim the grass. I plant the flowers. I repair the headstones when the weather cracks them. I know every section, every pathway, every grave in this cemetery. I know which families visit regularly and which plots haven't been touched in decades. Lot 22 has never had a visitor until last month. The grave belongs to an unidentified woman found in the woods off Route 11 in 2006. No ID, no missing person match. Dental records led nowhere. The state tried for 18 months to identify her. They ran DNA. They circulated her description. They checked every database. Nothing. So they buried her in our potter's field with a simple marker. Jane Doe, date of burial, plot number 22. I've maintained that section for 17 years. Cut the grass every week. Trimmed around the metal markers. No one ever leaves flowers. No one ever visits. It's just me and the graves and the work. Until I found the roses. It was a Thursday morning in late April. I was doing my usual rounds, checking for any storm damage from the night before. We'd had heavy rain. Some of the older sections tend to flood, so I was walking the drainage areas. That's when I saw them. A bouquet of white roses. 12 of them, tied with a white ribbon, lying across the marker for lot 22. I stopped walking. In 23 years, I have never seen flowers at an unmarked grave in the potter's field. Family members don't visit these plots. They don't know they exist. The people buried here died alone, were buried alone, and stay alone. But someone had left roses, fresh ones. The petals were still tight, dewy with rainwater. They couldn't have been there more than a few hours. I looked around. The cemetery was empty. The gates didn't open until 8 a.m., and it was just past 7. I was the only one with a key. I knelt down to pick up the bouquet. That's when I saw the note. It was tucked between the stems, folded in half, plain white paper. I opened it. The handwriting was shaky, but deliberate. 4 words. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. No signature, no date, just that single sentence. And at the bottom, a smudge, dark gray, roughly the size of a thumbprint. I touched it carefully. The texture was strange, gritty, like someone had pressed their thumb into ash or charcoal before touching the paper. I stood up, looked at the roses again. They were beautiful, perfect white petals, no blemishes, no wilting. I decided to leave them there. Whoever had left them clearly cared about this woman, even if they'd come 17 years late. I made a note in my log about the offering and went about my work. An hour later, I walked past Lot 22 again. The roses were dead, not wilted, not drooping, completely dead. The petals were brown and crisp, curled inward, like they'd been left in the sun for weeks. The ribbon had faded from white to a dull gray. The stems were brittle. I knelt down, touched one of the flowers. It crumbled in my fingers, turning to dust. An hour. They'd gone from fresh to completely desiccated in an hour. I picked up the bouquet carefully. The note was still there, tucked between the dried stems. I pulled it out. The paper was yellowed now, brittle at the edges, but the writing was still visible. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. The thumbprint was darker, blacker. It looked burned into the paper. I took the note back to my shed, put it in a plastic bag. I didn't know what else to do with it. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who had left the roses? How did they know about Lot 22? And why had the flowers died so quickly? I went back to the cemetery records, pulled the file for the Jane Doe burial. The details were sparse. Female, estimated age 35 to 40. Cause of death, exposure, found in late winter, lying in the snow. No coat, no shoes, like she'd walked into the woods and decided not to come back. There were photographs in the file, intake photos from the morgue. I'd seen them before, years ago, but I looked at them again. She had dark hair, thin face, a small scar above her left eyebrow. In one of the photos, you could see her hands. The right hand had a tattoo on the inner wrist, a small bird, a swallow, maybe. I closed the file. The next Thursday, I found another bouquet. Same spot, same white roses, same white ribbon, same note. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. Same thumbprint in ash. I checked my watch, 7:15 a.m. I'd been at the cemetery since 6:30. No one had entered through the main gate. No one had passed me on the pathways. But the roses were there. I decided to wait. I sat down on a bench about 50 feet from Lot 22 and watched. 30 minutes passed. The roses stayed fresh. 45 minutes. Still perfect. At the 1 hour mark, they started to change. It happened slowly at first. The edges of the petals turned brown. Then the color spread inward. Within 5 minutes, the entire bouquet was dead. Crumbling, turning to dust, I walked over, picked up the note. The paper was already yellowing, the thumbprint already burned black. I took it back to my shed, put it in the plastic bag with the first one. This continued for 6 weeks. Every Thursday, same time, same flowers, same note, same impossible decay. I stopped trying to figure out who was leaving them. I stopped looking for footprints or signs of entry. I just collected the notes, put them in plastic bags, filed them away until yesterday. I arrived at the cemetery at 6 a.m., walked straight to lot 22. There were no roses this time. Instead, there was a woman kneeling at the grave. I stopped walking. She was older, maybe 60, wearing a long black coat. Her hair was gray, pulled back in a bun. She had her hands pressed flat against the marker, her head bowed. I approached slowly, quietly. I didn't want to startle her. "Excuse me," I said. She didn't respond. I stepped closer. "Ma'am, visiting hours don't start until 8. I'll need to ask you to." She looked up at me. Her face was wrong, not disfigured, not monstrous, just wrong, too pale, too still, like a photograph instead of a living person, and her eyes were completely black. Not the pupils, the entire eye, black from edge to edge. She stood up slowly, looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, folded, white. She held it out to me. I didn't take it. She placed it on the marker, then she turned and walked away, straight toward the tree line at the edge of the cemetery. She didn't use the pathways. She walked directly through the graves, her black coat trailing behind her. I watched her until she disappeared into the trees. Then I looked at the paper. I already knew what it would say. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner." And at the bottom, the thumbprint, darker than all the others, burned so deep into the paper that it had gone through to the other side. I picked it up, turned it over. On the back, written in the same shaky handwriting, were 2 words: "She's home." I haven't seen the woman again. The roses stopped appearing. The notes stopped coming. But every time I walk past lot 22, I feel it. A presence. Quiet. Waiting. I don't know who the woman in the grave was. I don't know who was leaving the flowers. But I know this: someone was looking for her, and after 17 years of searching, they finally found her. The grave is quiet now. The marker is undisturbed, but sometimes, early in the morning, I smell white roses, even though nothing is blooming, even though nothing is there. Protocol exists for a reason, but sometimes protocol makes you witness things you wish you hadn't. My name is Elena Martinez, and I have served as funeral director at Rosewood Memorial Chapel in Austin, Texas, for 11 years. Part of my job involves documenting county-funded burials on video. It's a legal requirement, instituted after a lawsuit in the 90s when a family claimed their relative was buried in the wrong plot. Now we record everything: the casket seal, the lowering, the plot number confirmation. The footage goes into our archive. Most of it never gets reviewed. I wish I'd never reviewed the tape from Jane Doe, case number 318. She came to us on a Monday in February. Female, estimated age 28 to 32. Found in a hotel room downtown. Overdose. No identification. No phone. No luggage. The hotel manager said she'd paid cash for 3 nights and never checked out. By the time housekeeping found her, she'd been dead for approximately 96 hours. The police investigation went nowhere. No missing person match. No dental records in the system. After 60 days, the county gave up and authorized burial. Standard procedure, minimal casket, grave liner, plot in the county section. No service, no mourners, just documentation. I handled the preparation personally. We don't embalm for direct burials unless there's a delay, but she'd been held in cold storage long enough that preservation wasn't necessary. I just needed to ensure she was presentable for the required viewing window, even though no one would likely come. No one did. On the day of burial, I arrived at the cemetery with our groundskeeper and the county representative. Standard 3-person minimum for documentation purposes. I set up the camera on a tripod, positioned it to capture the casket and plot marker, and started recording. The timestamp read 10:42 a.m. I documented the casket seal first. That's protocol. You show the serial number on the seal, confirm it matches the paperwork, then demonstrate that it's intact before lowering. I zoomed in on the seal, stated the number aloud for the audio record, and confirmed it was unbroken. Then we lowered the casket. The groundskeeper operated the lowering device. I stood to the side, keeping the camera steady. The county rep stood behind me, checking boxes on his clipboard. The whole process took 4 minutes. At 10:47, the casket reached the bottom of the grave. The straps went slack. The groundskeeper began removing the lowering equipment. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks. Distinct, deliberate, coming from inside the casket. I stopped moving. The groundskeeper froze mid-motion. The county rep looked up from his clipboard. "Did you?" I started to say. Another 3 knocks, louder this time. The groundskeeper stepped back from the grave. "No," he said. "No, that's not. The seal is intact," I said. My voice sounded strange, too calm. "We verified it 2 minutes ago." The county rep walked to the edge of the grave, looked down. The casket was already 6 feet under, sitting at the bottom of the concrete liner. "Shifting," he said. "Something inside shifting during the lowering. Happens sometimes." "That wasn't shifting," the groundskeeper said. We stood there in silence, waiting. The cemetery was quiet except for the wind moving through the oak trees near the chapel. No more knocks came. The county rep made a note on his clipboard. "Continue," he said. I wanted to stop. I wanted to call for the casket to be raised, the seal to be checked, but I also knew what I'd heard. 3 knocks, and I knew, absolutely knew, that she'd been dead for 96 hours when they found her. The medical examiner had confirmed it. Time of death was not in question. We filled the grave. I kept the camera running the entire time. Standard protocol. Document everything. At 11:15, I stopped recording, packed up the equipment, drove back to the funeral home with the footage. I should have archived it immediately, should have uploaded it to the server and forgotten about it, but I couldn't. That night, I stayed late, pulled up the video file on my computer, plugged in headphones. I needed to know if I'd really heard what I thought I'd heard. I scrubbed to the timestamp, 10:47. The casket reaches the bottom. The straps go slack. The groundskeeper begins removing the equipment. Then, 3 knocks, clear as day, captured perfectly on the audio track. I could hear them through the headphones, 3 deliberate impacts against the interior of the casket lid. Knock, knock, knock. 2 seconds of silence, then three more, louder, more urgent. I rewound it, listened again. The knocks were undeniable. The rhythm was too precise to be settling or shifting. Someone was knocking from inside that casket, but that was impossible. She'd been dead for 4 days when they found her, another week in cold storage, then 3 days in the casket before burial. She'd been dead for 2 weeks. Dead bodies don't knock. I checked the seal verification timestamp, 10:42, 5 minutes before the knocks. The seal had been intact, unbroken, which meant the casket had been closed and locked since we'd placed her inside it 3 days earlier. I saved the audio, isolated just the knocking sounds, played them on loop. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. The pattern was deliberate, almost like a signal. I called the county medical examiner, left a voicemail, asked if there was any possibility, any chance at all, that the time of death estimate could have been wrong. He called me back the next morning. No chance, he said. Decomposition was well established. Rigor had come and gone. She'd been dead at least 4 days, probably longer. Could she have been in a coma? A vegetative state? Something that mimicked death? We ran blood work, he said. Toxicology. She was gone. Why are you asking? I told him about the knocks. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, gas. Decomposition produces gas. It shifts the body, can cause sounds, especially in a sealed environment. This wasn't gas, I said. Then what was it? I didn't have an answer. I've reviewed that footage maybe 50 times now. I've isolated the audio, enhanced it, slowed it down. The knocks are always there. 3, pause. 3, clear and deliberate. Last week I went back to the cemetery, stood at her grave. The grass has grown in. There's a temporary marker with her case number and burial date. No name, no inscription. I stood there for 20 minutes, listening, waiting, nothing. I drove back to the funeral home, pulled up the video again, watched it one more time. At the 10:47 mark, the knocks start. I've memorized the timestamp now. I don't even need to check. But this time, I kept watching past the knocks, past the point where we filled the grave. I watched all the way to the end of the recording. At 11:12, just before I stopped recording, there's something else on the audio. It's faint, almost inaudible, but when you turn up the volume and listen closely, you can hear it. A voice, female, muffled, coming from 6 feet underground. She's saying something, one word, repeated twice. I've listened to it 100 times, enhanced the audio, filtered out the background noise. The word is please, please, please. 2 syllables, clear enough to identify, quiet enough to miss unless you're looking for it. I sealed that file, marked it restricted, told myself I'd never open it again. But I know it's there, sitting in our archive, waiting. The county buried Jane Doe 318 on February 14th at 10:47 a.m. And 2 minutes before we filled her grave, she knocked 6 times. The seal was intact. The medical examiner confirmed she'd been dead for 2 weeks. But the audio doesn't lie. Someone was knocking, and someone was asking, please. I still hear it sometimes, late at night when I'm alone in the funeral home. 3 knocks, followed by silence, followed by 3 more. I've stopped reviewing burial footage. I document everything. I upload it to the server. I never watch it again because I know what might be on the audio and I'm not ready to hear it. I've dug over 2,000 graves and I've never hit another casket where there shouldn't be one. My name is Owen Briggs, and I have worked as a cemetery gravedigger at Hillside. Rest in Charleston, South Carolina for 19 years. My job is simple: dig the grave to regulation depth, prepare it for burial, fill it after the service. 6 feet down, 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, standard measurements. I use a backhoe for most of the work, then clean the edges by hand. It's physical labor, but it's honest. You show up, you dig, you go home. The ground tells you everything if you know how to read it. Soil consistency changes with depth. Clay at 4 feet, hard pan at 5. By the time you reach 6 feet, you know exactly what you're digging through. You know when you've hit rock. You know when you've hit roots. You know when you've hit something that shouldn't be there, like another casket. The call came in on a Thursday. John Doe burial. County funded. Plot assigned. Section 7, Row C, Grave 12. I checked the cemetery map. The plot was registered as empty. No previous burial. No marker. Clean space. I drove the backhoe to Section 7 at 7 a.m., set up the markers, started digging. The first 4 feet were routine: dark soil, some clay, a few rocks. Normal South Carolina earth. I kept the excavation clean, throwing dirt onto the tarp we use for filling later. At 5 feet, the bucket hit something solid. Not rock. Rock has a specific sound when you hit it, a dull clunk. This was different. Hollow, metallic. I stopped the backhoe, climbed down, grabbed my shovel, and jumped into the hole. I cleared away the loose dirt by hand, and there it was. A casket, steel construction, old. The finish was corroded, rust bleeding through in patches. The handles were tarnished bronze, no nameplate, no markings. I climbed out of the grave, pulled out my phone, called the cemetery director. I hit something, I said. Another casket, 4 feet down. That's not possible, he said. That plot is empty. Check the markers. Make sure you're in the right spot. I checked. Section 7, Row C, Grave 12. Exactly where I was supposed to be. I'm in the right spot, I said. But there's a casket here, old one, no registration. He was silent for a moment. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He arrived with the records clerk. They stood at the edge of the grave, looking down at the exposed casket. This doesn't make sense, the clerk said. She was holding a tablet, scrolling through burial records. Section 7 was opened in 1998. Every burial is documented. There's no record of anything in that plot. Could it be from before? I asked. Before the current system? We digitized everything back to 1950, she said. If there was a burial here, it would show up. The director looked at me. Open it. What? We need to know what's inside. If it's an unregistered burial, we need to document it. Identify the remains if possible. I didn't want to open it. Something about the casket felt wrong. The way it sat in the earth, perfectly level, like it had been waiting. But I grabbed my crowbar and climbed back down. The seal was corroded. It took 15 minutes of prying before the lid shifted. I braced myself for the smell. Old caskets usually reek of decay and moisture, but when I cracked it open, there was nothing, just stale air, dry. I lifted the lid fully. Inside was a man, or what was left of one. The body was in good condition, considering the age of the casket. Mummified mostly. Leathery skin, sunken features. He was dressed in a dark suit, hands folded across his chest, and he was wearing the exact same jacket as the John Doe we were burying today. I stared at it. Dark blue windbreaker, synthetic material, the kind you buy at a discount store. There was a tear in the left sleeve, about 3 inches long, frayed edges. I'd seen that jacket 2 hours ago, in our morgue, on the body of the John Doe scheduled for burial in this exact plot, same color, same style, same tear in the same place. I climbed out of the grave, pulled off my gloves. My hands were shaking. "What is it?" the director asked. "The jacket," I said. "It's the same." "The same as what?" "The same as the John Doe we're burying today. Same jacket, same tear." The clerk pulled up the intake photos on her tablet, showed them to the director. The John Doe in our morgue was wearing a dark blue windbreaker with a tear in the left sleeve. The director looked at the casket, looked at the photos, looked at me. "Coincidence," he said. "That's not a coincidence," I said. He didn't respond, just stood there, staring into the grave. We took photographs, documented everything. The director called the county medical examiner, explained the situation. The examiner arrived an hour later with a forensic team. They removed the unregistered casket, took it to the morgue for examination. I stood there watching them work, trying to understand what I'd just found. 2 hours later, I got the call. The forensic examiner had run a preliminary analysis on the remains in the unregistered casket. Male, estimated age 50 to 60. Time of death, approximately 20 to 25 years ago. But here's what made my blood run cold. The blood stain on the jacket. The small dark patch just below the tear matched the location and pattern of the blood stain on the John Doe we were supposed to bury today. Same jacket, same tear, same blood stain, different face, different body, different time of death by 2 decades. I didn't dig the rest of the grave that day. They postponed the burial, sent the John Doe back to the morgue for further examination. I went home, couldn't sleep, kept thinking about that casket sitting in the earth, waiting, like it had been there specifically for me to find, like it was supposed to be discovered at that exact moment. The next morning, I got another call from the director. They identified the body from the unregistered casket, he said. "Who was it?" "That's the problem. They ran his prints, got a hit in the system. And his name was Michael Garrett, reported missing in 2003, never found." I waited. "The John Doe we were going to bury yesterday," he said. "We just got a positive ID from a family member who came forward." "Who?" "Michael Garrett." The line went quiet. "That's impossible," I said. "I know. We found his body yesterday in a casket that's been underground for 20 years. He can't also be the fresh body in our morgue." "I know," he said again. I hung up. I haven't been back to Section 7 since. They assigned someone else to finish the grave, someone else to handle the burial. I don't know if they ever figured out the discrepancy. I don't know if they buried the second Michael Garrett or if they're still trying to determine which body is real. I just know this. I dug down 4 feet and found a man wearing the same jacket as the corpse we were about to bury above him. Same tear, same blood stain, different face. And somewhere in our records, both men have the same name. I still dig graves. I still show up every morning. But now, whenever I start a new plot, I wonder, what if I dig down and find myself looking back? I've heard a lot of sounds in a mortuary, but I've never heard the dead sing. My name is Leah Morrison, and I have worked as a mortician at Clearwater Funeral Home in Boise, Idaho, for 8 years. I handle intake, preparation, cosmetic restoration. I work mostly night shifts because that's when the bodies come in. Hospitals call it midnight. Nursing homes call it 3 a.m. The medical examiner's office releases remains at odd hours. Someone has to be here to receive them. I'm used to working alone. I'm used to the silence, the hum of the refrigeration units, the occasional creak of the building settling, the white noise of solitude. But I'm not used to hearing lullabies coming from Prep Room 3. She arrived on a Wednesday just after midnight. Female, approximately 30 years old. Overdose, no identification, no purse, no phone, no wallet. Just a Jane Doe found on a park bench downtown. A jogger discovered her at dawn, already gone. The police estimated she'd been there since sometime the previous evening. The medical examiner cleared the body for release after the autopsy. No suspicious circumstances, no need for further investigation. Standard overdose case. The county would handle the burial after the mandatory waiting period for identification. I received her at 1:15 a.m., signed the transfer paperwork, wheeled her into Prep Room 3. Standard intake procedure. Photograph, document visible marks or identifying features, place in cold storage. She had dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail. No tattoos, no scars. A small birthmark on her left shoulder. I documented everything, took measurements, filled out the intake form. Before moving her to storage, I paused. She looked peaceful, not in the artificial way we create during preparation, but genuinely at rest, like she'd fallen asleep and simply hadn't woken up. I covered her with a sheet and left her on the prep table. I'd move her to cold storage in the morning. The room was climate controlled. She'd be fine overnight. I locked Prep Room 3 and went to my office to finish the paperwork. At 2:45 a.m., I heard it, humming. Low, rhythmic, melodic, coming from down the hall. I stopped typing, listened. It was faint, but unmistakable, a tune I didn't recognize. Slow and mournful, the kind of melody you'd sing to calm a restless child. I stood up, walked into the hallway. The sound was coming from Prep Room 3. I unlocked the door, turned on the light. The room was empty, except for the covered body on the table. The humming stopped the moment I opened the door. I stood there in the doorway, listening, nothing. Just the hum of the ventilation system, the distant sound of traffic outside. I walked to the table, pulled back the sheet slightly. Her face was unchanged, peaceful, Still, I covered her again, locked the room, went back to my office. At 3:30, the humming started again. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the security camera app. We have cameras in all the prep rooms. Liability insurance requires it. I switched to the feed for prep room 3. The image was clear, the body on the table, the sheet covering her, nothing moving, nothing out of place. But the audio feed was picking up the humming. I could hear it through my phone's speaker, low and steady, a lullaby. The melody was simple, repetitive, the kind of tune that gets stuck in your head. I watched the camera feed. The body didn't move, her chest didn't rise, her lips didn't part, but the humming continued. I called security. Our night guard picked up on the second ring. Yeah? Are you near prep room 3? I asked. I'm doing rounds on the second floor. Why? Can you hear anything? Music? Humming? No. Should I come down? Please. He arrived 3 minutes later. We stood together in the hallway outside prep room 3. The humming had stopped again. I don't hear anything, he said. It was there a minute ago. I heard it on the camera feed. He looked at me. You want me to check inside? I unlocked the door. We went in together. The room was exactly as I'd left it. The body on the table, the sheet in place, everything undisturbed. Probably the ventilation system, he said. Sometimes the ducts make weird noises. Sounds like humming if you're tired enough. I didn't argue. I thanked him. He left. I stood alone in prep room 3, looking at the covered body. Then I heard it again, not from the vents, not from the hallway, from the table, from her. I pulled back the sheet. Her mouth was closed, her face was still, but the humming was coming from her direction. Soft and clear and impossible. I touched her shoulder, cold, stiff. Rigor mortis was well established. She'd been dead for at least 12 hours. The humming continued. I grabbed my phone, pulled up the camera app again, switched to audio recording, held the phone close to her face. The melody came through perfectly. A lullaby, simple and haunting, the kind of song a mother would sing. I played it back. The humming was there, clear as day. I checked her mouth, closed. I checked her throat. No movement, no vibration, but the sound was coming from her. I covered her face, stepped back. The humming faded, stopped. I waited 30 seconds. Then I pulled the sheet back. The humming started again immediately. I called the medical examiner's office, left a voicemail, asked if there was any possibility of a misdiagnosis, any chance she wasn't actually dead. I knew it was absurd, but I needed to ask. The examiner called me back at 8 a.m. I performed the autopsy myself, he said. She was deceased on arrival. No heartbeat, no brain activity. Overdose was confirmed by toxicology. She's been gone for probably 14 hours. Why? I didn't tell him about the humming. I just said I wanted to confirm. At 9 a.m., I moved her to cold storage, Unit 7. I closed the door, locked it. From inside the unit, I could still hear it, muffled by the insulated door, but there, the same lullaby, slow and mournful. I walked away. That night, I came back for my regular shift. The first thing I did was check the security footage from Prep Room 3. I scrubbed through the entire night. At 4:37 a.m., long after I'd moved her to cold storage, the camera audio picked up the humming again. The room was empty. The table was bare, but the microphone captured it clearly. The same lullaby, playing in an empty room. I pulled her file, looked at the intake photos again. The birthmark on her shoulder caught my attention. I zoomed in. It wasn't a birthmark. It was a scar, small, circular, about the size of a quarter, the kind of scar you'd get from a burn. I checked the medical examiner's notes. Under distinguishing marks, he'd listed it as possible cigarette burn scar, left shoulder. I thought about the lullaby, the gentle, repetitive melody, the kind of song a mother sings. And I thought about the scar. The humming continued for 3 days. Every night, same time, same melody. It played in prep room 3, even when she wasn't there. It played in cold storage. It played through the camera feeds. On the 4th day, a woman came to the funeral home. She said she might know the deceased. She'd seen the news report about the unidentified body. I showed her the intake photos. She started crying. "That's my daughter," she said. "Emma. I haven't seen her in 6 years, not since she left." "I'm very sorry for your loss," I said. She wiped her eyes. "She used to hum that song when she was little. I taught it to her. I'd sing it every night before bed." "What song?" I asked. She hummed a few bars. It was the same lullaby, the same one I'd been hearing for 3 days. We released Emma to her mother for burial. The service was small, just family. The humming stopped after she was buried. Prep room 3 is quiet now. The camera feeds pick up nothing unusual, just the hum of ventilation and the occasional footstep in the hall. But sometimes, late at night, I think I hear it, that lullaby, soft and distant, coming from nowhere at all. Every funeral deserves at least one witness, even if no one claims the deceased. My name is Roy Patterson, and I have worked as a chapel attendant at Heritage Memorial Services in Topeka, Kansas for 16 years. My job is simple: set up the chapel for services, assist families, coordinate with clergy, ensure everything runs smoothly. I've overseen thousands of funerals. Some are packed with hundreds of mourners. Others are intimate gatherings of close family. And some, the county-funded ones, have no one at all. Those are the hardest to witness. An empty chapel, a casket with no flowers, a name no one came to speak. But I've never seen an empty chapel fill itself. The service was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Tuesday in November. The deceased was identified only as John Doe, case number 619, male, approximately 70 years old, found deceased in a homeless shelter, no family located, no friends came forward. The county authorized a basic service, simple casket, 15-minute committal, direct burial. Father Mulcahy agreed to officiate. He's done these services for years. He arrives, says a few words, offers a prayer, and leaves. It's not much, but it's something. A small dignity for someone who died alone. I set up the chapel that morning, 6 rows of chairs, though I knew they'd stay empty. A small podium for Father Mulcahy. The casket positioned at the front, closed per county protocol for unidentified remains. At 1:45, I did a final walkthrough. Everything was ready. The lighting was soft. The temperature comfortable, the sound system tested. The chapel was empty. Father Mulcahy arrived at 1:55. We stood together near the entrance, waiting to see if anyone would come. Sometimes someone shows up at the last minute, a social worker who knew the deceased, a shelter volunteer, someone who felt compelled to attend. At 2 p.m., the chapel was still empty. Shall we begin? Father Mulcahy asked. I nodded. We walked down the center aisle together. He took his place at the podium. I sat in the front row, right side, the only attendee. Father Mulcahy opened his book, began reading. We gather today to commend our brother to God's care. His voice echoed softly in the empty space. I bowed my head, listening. That's when I heard the door open behind me. I turned. An elderly woman stood in the doorway. She was dressed in black, a long coat, a small hat with a veil, gloves. She held a purse in her gloved hands. I stood up, ready to greet her, but she walked past me without acknowledgement, moved down the aisle slowly. Her footsteps were silent on the carpet. She sat down in the back row, far left corner. She folded her hands in her lap and bowed her head. I glanced at Father Mulcahy. He was still reading, apparently unaware of her arrival. I sat back down. The service continued. Father Mulcahy read a psalm, offered a prayer, spoke briefly about the dignity of every human life, regardless of circumstance. I found myself glancing back at the woman periodically. She sat perfectly still, head bowed, hands folded, not moving, not reacting. After 15 minutes, Father Mulcahy concluded, May his soul rest in peace. Amen. Amen, I said quietly. I expected the woman to respond, to say amen, to acknowledge the end of the service, but she remained silent. Still, Father Mulcahy closed his book, looked at me. Shall we proceed to the cemetery? Yes, Father. I just need to check with the attendee. I gestured toward the book row. He turned, looked, frowned. What attendee? I pointed. The woman in the back row, left corner. Father Mulcahy walked down the aisle, looked directly at the spot where the woman sat. Roy, there's no one here. I stood up, walked to the back, looked at the left corner seat. It was empty. She was sitting right here, I said. I saw her come in, halfway through the service, black coat, veil. Father Mulcahy looked at me carefully. I didn't see anyone. She walked right past you, I said. Down the aisle. She sat in this exact seat. He put his hand on my shoulder. Roy, I've been watching the room the entire time. No one came in after we started. It's been just you and me. I stared at the empty chair. The seat cushion showed no impression, no warmth, like no one had been sitting there at all. I saw her, I said. Father Mulcahy didn't argue. He just nodded. Let's proceed with the burial. We drove to the cemetery in separate cars. The groundskeepers had already opened the grave. We stood under a portable canopy while they lowered the casket. Father Mulcahy said a final prayer. As he spoke, I saw her again. She was standing approximately 20 feet away, near a large oak tree, same black coat, same veil, watching us. Father, I said quietly, do you see her by the tree? He looked, squinted, shook his head. I don't see anyone. I walked toward her. She didn't move, didn't react, just stood there, watching the burial. When I got within 10 feet, I stopped. Her face was covered by the veil, but I could see the outline of her features. The veil was old, vintage, the kind you'd see in photographs from the 1940s or 50s. "Excuse me," I said. "Did you know the deceased?" She didn't respond. "Were you family?" Still nothing. I stepped closer, reached out to touch her shoulder. My hand passed through empty air. She wasn't there. I spun around. Father Mulcahy was watching me from the gravesite, concern on his face. "Roy?" I walked back to him. I saw her again, by the tree. He looked at the tree. "Roy, I think you should take the rest of the day off." I didn't argue. We finished the burial. I drove back to the funeral home, checked the chapel security footage. I scrubbed to 2 p.m., the start of the service. Father Mulcahy and I walked down the aisle. We took our positions. He began reading. At 2:07, the chapel door opened. I watched the footage carefully. The door moved, opened approximately 2 feet, then closed. No one entered, no figure, no woman in black, just the door opening and closing on its own. The camera angle showed the entire back row. Every seat was visible, every seat was empty. But I had seen her. I had watched her walk down the aisle. I had seen her sit in that chair. I called the security company, asked if there was a malfunction with the camera. They reviewed the footage remotely. "No malfunction," they said. "The door opened at 2:07, probably wind, or the latch didn't catch, but no one entered." I checked the cemetery footage next. Our cameras cover the main sections. I found the timestamp for the burial. Father Mulcahy and I standing at the grave, the groundskeepers operating the lowering equipment. I watched myself walk toward the oak tree, watched myself stop 10 feet away, watched myself reach out toward nothing. The tree was there, the grave was there, Father Mulcahy was there, but the woman wasn't. I've thought about her every day since. I've reviewed the footage dozens of times. I've asked Father Mulcahy if he's ever experienced something similar. He hasn't. But here's what I can't explain. After the service, I went back to the chapel to clean up. I walked to the back row, the left corner seat where I'd seen her sitting. On the seat cushion, there was a single white flower petal. I picked it up. It was fresh, soft, recently fallen. I looked around the chapel. No flowers, no arrangements, no source for the petal. I put it in a small envelope, filed it with the service records. I still have it, and I still don't have an explanation because the camera says no one was there. Father Mulcahy says no one was there. But I saw her, and she left a flower petal behind. The next time I prepare an empty chapel for a county burial, I set up all the chairs, just in case someone comes. Someone I can't see, someone who needs to say goodbye. The dead don't cry, but sometimes they remember how. My name is Grace Holloway, and I have worked as an embalmer at Riverside Mortuary in Portland, Maine for 13 years. In that time, I have prepared over 900 bodies for viewing. I understand decomposition. I understand tissue preservation. I understand that once a person dies, all biological processes cease. The heart stops, The lungs collapse. The tear ducts dry out. Dead bodies don't produce moisture. They can't. They're vessels without function, empty containers that used to hold life. So when I felt warm tears on the face of a woman who'd been dead for 6 days, I knew something was fundamentally wrong. Her name was Sarah, or at least that's what we called her. Sarah Doe, female, approximately 24 years old, found in Washington Park during a January cold snap, hypothermia. She'd been sitting on a bench facing the frozen pond, wearing only a light sweater and jeans. No coat, no identification, no phone. A jogger found her at dawn. She'd been there all night. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees. The medical examiner estimated time of death at approximately 2 a.m. The police investigation went nowhere. No missing person match, no dental records, no fingerprint hits. After the mandatory holding period, the county authorized preparation for burial. She arrived at our facility on a Monday. I received her from the transport driver, signed the paperwork, wheeled her into intake room 2. Standard procedure: photograph, document distinguishing marks, prepare for embalming. She was young, too young, dark hair, shoulder length, pale skin. Her eyes were closed, frozen that way by the cold. Her expression was peaceful, not peaceful the way I make bodies look during preparation, but genuinely at rest, like she'd fallen asleep watching the pond. I checked her into our system, assigned her a preparation slot for the following morning. Then I transferred her to our refrigeration unit, cold storage bay. 3. Temperature maintained at 38 degrees Fahrenheit. I closed the drawer, locked it, went home. The next morning, I arrived at 7, had coffee in the break room, reviewed the day's schedule. Sarah was my first case. Simple preparation, no viewing, no service, just basic embalming for preservation until burial. I unlocked cold storage bay 3, pulled out the drawer, and stopped. Her face was wet. I stood there, staring, moisture on her cheeks, thin trails running from the corners of her eyes down to her jawline, like she'd been crying. I touched one of the trails with my gloved finger. The moisture was warm, not room temperature, not cold from the refrigeration unit, warm, body temperature. I pulled my hand back, checked the thermostat on the storage unit. 38 degrees, functioning normally, no malfunction, no temperature spike, but her tears were warm. I grabbed a cotton swab, collected a sample from her cheek, held it under the light. Clear fluid, consistent with tears, not condensation, not residual moisture from transport. Tears. I checked her eyes, still closed, but when I gently lifted one eyelid, her eye was moist, fresh, like she'd been crying moments before. I've seen a lot of strange things in this job. Bodies that shift during rigor mortis, gases that cause sounds or movement, fluid that seeps from orifices during decomposition. But I'd never seen a body produce fresh tears 6 days after death. I documented everything, photographed her face, collected samples, then I cleaned her carefully, wiping away the moisture. I proceeded with the embalming, arterial injection through the carotid, standard formaldehyde solution. The process went normally. Her tissue accepted the preservative well. No complications. When I finished, I cleaned her face one final time, positioned her for storage. Her eyes were closed. Her face was dry. Everything was as it should be. I placed her back in cold storage bay 3, closed the drawer, locked it. 2 hours later, I opened it again to transfer her to the casket. The tears were back, fresh trails down both cheeks, warm to the touch. Her eyes still closed, but wet beneath the lids. I called my supervisor. She came down to the prep room, looked at Sarah's face, touched the moisture, frowned. "That's not possible," she said. "I know. You embalmed her, replaced the blood with preservative?" "Yes, full arterial." "Then she's not producing anything. This is condensation or residual fluid from the injection." I showed her the samples I'd collected, clear, consistent with tears, not embalming fluid, not condensation. She looked at Sarah's face for a long time. "Has this ever happened before?" "No." She touched Sarah's cheek again. "It's warm." "I know." We stood there in silence. My supervisor finally said, "Finish the preparation. Get her into the casket. We'll document everything and report it to the medical examiner." I wiped away the tears, applied cosmetic setting, dressed her in the simple gown the county provided, transferred her to the casket, a plain wooden container, no lining. Before I closed the lid, I checked her face one final time. Dry, still, at peace. I closed the casket, sealed it, moved it to the viewing room where it would stay until the burial the next day. That night, I stayed late to finish paperwork. At 10 p.m., I walked past the viewing room. The door was closed, but I could hear something, soft, rhythmic, like breathing. I unlocked the door, turned on the lights. The casket was closed, sealed, everything as I'd left it. But I could hear it, quiet breathing, coming from inside. I stood there listening for 5 minutes. The sound didn't stop. In, out, slow and steady. I called security. The night guard came up. We stood together, listening. "You hear that?" I asked. "Yeah, sounds like breathing." We unsealed the casket, lifted the lid. Sarah's face was covered in tears, fresh ones, still flowing from beneath her closed eyelids. Her cheeks were wet. The moisture pooled slightly at her jawline. And her chest, I swear to God, her chest was moving, up and down, barely perceptible, but moving. The security guard stepped back. "That's not right." I touched her neck. No pulse. I put my hand on her chest. No heartbeat, just the slight movement, like breathing, but without any of the biological indicators of life. The tears continued to flow. I closed the casket, resealed it. We left the viewing room. I locked the door. The burial happened the next morning. I didn't attend. I asked another technician to handle the transport to the cemetery. He called me afterward. "Hey, Grace, did you notice anything unusual about the Jane Doe?" My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Her face was wet when we got to the cemetery, like she'd been crying, but the casket was sealed. No leak, no condensation, just tears. I didn't respond. "I wiped her face before we closed the grave," he said. "Thought you should know." I thanked him, hung up. I pulled her file that afternoon, looked at the intake photos one more time. Young woman, dark hair, peaceful expression. In one of the photos, a close-up of her face, there was something I hadn't noticed before. Faint tracks on her cheeks. dried tear stains. From before she died, she'd been crying when they found her, sitting on that bench, watching the frozen pond, crying in the cold. And maybe she never stopped. I think about her sometimes, wonder if she's still crying in her grave, wonder if anyone hears it. I don't work in this field to understand death. I work here to help the living say goodbye. But Sarah taught me something. Sometimes the dead aren't ready to let go either, and sometimes their grief outlasts their life. I measure every grave I oversee, and I've never been wrong about depth. My name is Catherine Kim, and I have served as funeral director at Oakmont Memorial Park in Seattle, Washington, for 14 years. Part of my responsibility is ensuring burials meet state regulations. 6 feet deep, minimum, 4 feet wide, 8 feet long. These measurements aren't suggestions, they're requirements. I verify them personally before every burial. I've overseen 3,000 funerals. I've never had a discrepancy, never had a complaint, never had a grave that wasn't exactly where I put it, until the rain exposed Plot 217. The burial happened in March. Male, unidentified, found deceased in a downtown alley. No ID, no fingerprints in the system, no dental match. The county funded the burial after 60 days with no leads. Standard procedure, simple casket, basic service, Potter's Field plot. I handled the arrangements personally, met with the cemetery groundskeeper the day before to verify the grave was ready. I brought my measuring tape, checked the depth, 6 feet exactly. I documented it in my records, took photographs, everything by the book. The burial took place on a Thursday morning. Overcast, light drizzle, just me, the groundskeeper, and a chaplain. We lowered the casket at 10 a.m. I watched it descend into the grave. 6 feet down. The straps went slack. The casket settled at the bottom. I supervised the filling, watched as the groundskeeper operated the backhoe, carefully replacing the soil, layer by layer, tamped down, smoothed. A temporary marker was placed at the head of the grave. Plot 217, date of burial, case number. I made my final inspection. The grave was level with the surrounding ground, properly filled, everything correct. I signed off on the paperwork, filed it, moved on to the next case. 2 months later, we had the storm. Seattle gets rain, but this was different. 3 days of constant downpour. The kind of rain that overwhelms drainage systems and turns solid ground into mud. The cemetery flooded in the low-lying sections. Several older graves showed signs of settling, normal after heavy weather. On the 4th day, the rain stopped. I walked the cemetery grounds to assess damage. Most of the flooding had drained. A few headstones had tilted. Some sod had washed away. Minor issues, easy repairs. Then I reached Plot 217. The grave had collapsed, not settled, collapsed. The soil had caved in, creating a depression about 3 feet deep, and at the bottom of that depression, I could see it. The casket, exposed, partially uncovered, sitting in a pool of muddy water, but it wasn't 6 feet down, it was 12. I stood at the edge of the collapsed grave, staring. The casket was visible, but it was far deeper than it should have been. Far deeper than regulation. Far deeper than I'd measured. I called the groundskeeper. He arrived within 20 minutes. How is this possible? I asked. I measured this grave myself, 6 feet. You were there. He climbed down into the depression, examined the exposed casket, measured the distance from ground level to the top of the casket with a tape measure. 12 feet, he said, give or take a few inches. That's impossible. I supervised this burial. I watched you dig it. I measured the depth before we lowered the casket. He climbed back out, looked at me. I dug 6 feet. I'm certain. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know what 6 feet it looks like. Then how did it get to 12? He didn't answer. We spent the next hour trying to make sense of it. Pulled the burial records. I showed him my photographs from the day before the burial. The measuring tape clearly visible in the frame, extending 6 feet down into the grave. Maybe the ground settled, he suggested. Sinkholes, erosion. The soil could have given way after we filled it. 6 feet of settling, I said, in 2 months, without any visible surface disturbance until now? He had no explanation. I called a soil engineer, explained the situation. He came out the next day, took samples, ran tests. No evidence of sinkhole activity, no unusual erosion. The soil composition was stable, clay and hard pan, the kind of earth that doesn't shift dramatically. If anything, he said, this soil should be resistant to settling. I can't explain how a casket would sink 6 feet in 2 months. It's not geologically feasible. I pulled the original grave digging work order, checked the equipment logs. The backhoe operator's notes indicated he'd excavated to exactly 6 feet, verified by measurement before he left the site. But the casket was 12 feet down. We had to re-excavate the grave, bring in equipment, dig down to 12 feet, recover the casket, re-enter it at the proper depth. It took 2 days. When we finally pulled the casket out, I examined it carefully. No damage. The seal was intact. The identification plate matched our records. It was definitely the same casket we'd buried 2 months earlier. But something was wrong. The casket was covered in soil. Normal. Expected. But the soil wasn't fresh. It was old, compressed, the kind of dirt that's been undisturbed for years, not months. The patina on the casket handles showed corrosion consistent with long-term burial. Decades, not weeks. I took photographs, documented everything. Then we reburied him at 6 feet, properly this time. I measured it myself, verified it those times. I filed a report with the county, explained what happened. They reviewed my documentation, accepted my findings, and archived the case as an unexplained anomaly. But I couldn't let it go. I started checking other burials, measuring graves I'd supervised years ago. Most were exactly where they should be. 6 feet, regulation depth. But I found 3 others, all in the Potter's Field section, all unidentified burials, all buried at depths that didn't match my records. One at 10 feet, one at 8, one at 14, all of them graves I'd personally measured and verified at 6 feet before burial. I showed the groundskeeper, showed him the records, the photographs, the measurements. I don't understand, he said. I dig them at 6. You verify 6, but they're deeper. How is this happening? I asked. He looked at the potter's field section, rows of simple markers, numbers instead of names. Maybe they want to go deeper, he said quietly. That doesn't make sense. None of this makes stick sense. I stopped verifying potter's field graves after that. I still measure. I still document. But I don't go back to check because I know what I'll find. Graves that are deeper than they should be. Caskets that have sunk into earth that doesn't shift. Burials that descend on their own, slowly, over months or years, until they're far below regulation depth. Last month, we buried another John Doe. Potter's Field. Plot 423. I measured the grave before burial, 6 feet exactly. I have photographs, I have documentation, but I absolutely know, that if I go back in a year and dig it up, that casket will be deeper, 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet, sinking slowly into the earth, descending to a depth that wasn't dug, that wasn't measured, that wasn't authorized. The county asked me to explain the anomalies. I told them I couldn't. I told them the soil was stable, the measurements were correct, the graves were properly prepared. I didn't tell them what I really think, that some people, even in death, want to disappear, want to sink deeper, want to be buried so far down that no one will ever find them. And somehow, the earth accommodates. I still measure every grave. I still document everything. I still follow protocol. But I don't check the potter's field anymore because I already know what's happening down there, and I'm not sure I want to understand why. I've seen a lot of offerings left at graves, but I've never seen offerings that appear on their own. My name is Teresa Brennan, and I have worked as a groundskeeper at Elmwood Cemetery in Burlington, Vermont for 21 years. I maintain the grounds, mow the grass, trim around headstones, remove debris, and occasionally I collect the things people leave at graves: flowers, photographs, small mementos, coins. Coins are common. It's an old tradition. Pennies for remembrance, nickels for training together, dimes for service, quarters for presents at death. I collect them once a month, put them in a donation box. The cemetery uses the money for maintenance, but the coins in the potter's field are different. They appear in perfect circles, and they're always old, far older than they should be. I first noticed them 3 years ago. I was walking through the unmarked section, checking for damage after a windstorm. The potter's field is the oldest part of Elmwood. Most of the burials date back to the 1800s. No headstones, just small and metal markers with numbers. Some have names, but most are blank, unknown, forgotten. I was clearing fallen branches when I saw them. Coins arranged in a circle around one of the unmarked graves. 8 of them, evenly spaced, perfect symmetry. I knelt down, examined them. They weren't modern quarters or dimes. These were old. Buffalo nickels, mercury dimes, Indian head pennies, tarnished, worn, the kind of coins you'd find in a collection, not left on a grave. I checked the dates: 1892, 1907, 1923, different years, but all from the late 1800s to early 1900s. I looked at the grave marker, just a number, 47, no name, no date. The burial records for this section were destroyed in a fire decades ago. We have no idea who's buried here. I collected the coins, put them in my work pouch, made a note in my log. Probably a coin collector, I thought. Someone leaving valuable currency as an offering. Unusual, but not impossible. The next morning, the coins were back. Same grave, same circle, same 8 coins. I stopped walking, stared at them. I'd collected these exact coins yesterday, put them in the donation box back at the maintenance shed, locked the box, went home. But here they were, same buffalo nickels, same mercury dimes, same arrangement, perfect circle, 8 coins. I picked one up, examined it closely. 1892 Indian head penny. I recognized it. The distinctive wear pattern on Lincoln's profile, the small scratch near the date. This was the exact same coin I'd collected yesterday. I looked around the cemetery. It was 6 a.m. The gates didn't open until 8. I was the only one here. I had the only key to the maintenance shed. No one could have taken these coins from the donation box and returned them to the grave overnight. It wasn't possible, but here they were. I decided to leave them, see what happened. I photographed the arrangement, documented the coin positions, went about my work. The next day, I checked the grave. The coins were still there. Same circle, same positions. I examined the ground around them. No footprints, no signs of disturbance. Just the coins, sitting on the grass like they'd always been there. Over the next week, I found more circles, different graves, different coins, but always the same pattern. 8 coins, perfect symmetry, old currency, dates ranging from the 1860s to the 1920s. I started mapping them, documenting which graves had coins, what denominations, what years. I spent hours cross-referencing with burial records, trying to find a pattern. Then I noticed something. The dates on the coins matched the estimated burial years. Grave 47 had coins dated 1892. According to the partial records we had, that grave was dug sometime in the 1890s. Grave 63 had coins from 1908. Burial year 1908. Perfect correlation. Every grave with coins had currency dated to the year of burial. I showed my supervisor. He looked at my documentation, examined the coins, frowned. Someone's researching our burial records, he said. Matching dates, leaving appropriate currency. It's a memorial project, maybe a historical society. Our records for this section don't exist, I said. They burned in the fire. We don't have burial dates for most of these graves. Then they're guessing, estimating, close enough to make it seem accurate. These aren't estimates, these are exact matches. He handed the coins back to me. Keep them. If someone wants to leave historical currency as offerings, that's their choice. Just document it. I tried to catch whoever was leaving them. I arrived early, stayed late, set up a trail camera pointed at the potter's field. Nothing. The camera never captured anyone approaching the graves, but every morning, new coins appeared, always in circles, always 8 coins, always matching the burial years. Last month, I decided to stay overnight. I parked outside the cemetery gates, waited until midnight. Then I climbed the fence and walked to the potter's field. The moon was bright enough to see by. I positioned myself behind a large monument with a clear view of the unmarked section. I waited 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., nothing. The grave sat silent, undisturbed. At 4 a.m., I saw it. Not a person, just a faint shimmer in the air above one of the graves. Like heat distortion or light bending, it lasted maybe 5 seconds, then it was gone. I walked to the grave. The coins were there, 8 of them, arranged in a perfect circle, still warm to the touch. I picked one up, Indian head penny, 1876. I looked at the grave marker, number 18. I checked my notes, estimated burial year, 1876. The coin was warm, freshly placed, but no one had been there. No footprints in the dew-covered grass, no disturbance, just the coins, appearing on their own. I've stopped trying to understand it. I just document what I find, photograph the arrangements, record the dates. The collection is extensive now. Hundreds of coins, buffalo nickels, mercury dimes, Indian head pennies, Liberty dollars, every denomination from the 1860s to the 1920s, all of them warm when I first find them, all of them perfectly arranged, all of them matching burial years we have no record of. Last week, a historian from the state archive contacted us. She'd heard about the coins, asked if she could examine them. I showed her my collection, explained the pattern. She spent 3 days cross-referencing the coin dates with every available burial record from Vermont. Census data, church registers, newspaper obituaries. She found matches for 43 of the graves. Every single coin date corresponded to a confirmed burial year. This is remarkable, she said. Most of these graves have no markers, no records, but someone knows exactly when these people were buried, and they're leaving period-appropriate currency as tribute. I don't think it's a person, I said. She looked at me. Then what is it? I didn't answer. She published a paper about the coins, called it Anonymous Memorial, the Mysterious Currency Circle, Phenomenon of Elmwood Cemetery's Potter's Field. It got attention. People started visiting, looking for the coins, photographing them. I stopped collecting them, left them where they appear. They're not mine to take. They're offerings. From who or what, I don't know, but they're not mine. This morning, I found a new circle. Grave 91, 8 coins, buffalo nickels dated 1923. I photographed them, left them in place, continued my rounds. When I came back an hour later, there were 9 coins. An extra one placed perfectly in the circle, a mercury dime, dated 1924. I checked my notes. Grave 91, estimated burial year 1923, but the new coin was dated 1924, 1 year later. I knelt down, examined the circle. 8 coins from 1923, 1 from 1924, all arranged perfectly, all warm to the touch. And I understood. These aren't just offerings. They're messages, markers, time stamps. Someone is remembering these graves, counting the years, leaving currency for each one. 1923, 1924, slowly, year by year, marking time for people who have no one else to remember them. I don't know who's leaving the coins. I don't know how they appear. I don't know why they're always in perfect circles. But I know this: every unmarked grave in the potter's field is being remembered, counted, honored with coins that match the years they were buried and the years that followed, and every morning there are more. I've transported hundreds of bodies, and I've never had one call me. My name is Benjamin Cross, and I have worked as a mortuary transport technician for Valley View Funeral Services in Phoenix, Arizona for 7 years. My job is straightforward. Pick up deceased individuals from hospitals, homes, or the medical examiner's office and transport them to our facility for preparation. I work alone, drive a unmarked white van, keep my phone on for dispatch calls. It's routine, quiet, professional, until the call that came from nowhere. It was a Tuesday night in October. I'd just picked up a body from County General, female, mid-50s, heart failure, found deceased in her apartment by a neighbor who noticed mail piling up. No family notified yet, no personal effects beyond what she was wearing when they found her. I loaded her into the van at 11:45 p.m., secured the gurney, closed the rear doors, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Dispatch usually calls from a registered line, but I thought maybe it was the hospital with additional information. I answered. Valley View Transport. Silence, not an empty silence. Someone was there. I could hear breathing, soft, hesitant. Hello, I said. A woman's voice, older, strained. Did you find my ring? I'm sorry. My ring. Did you find it? Ma'am, I think you have the wrong number. Please, she said. I need to know. Did you find my ring? I'm a mortuary transport driver. If you've lost property at a hospital or check her left hand. I stopped talking. My grip tightened on the phone. What did you say? Check her left hand. Please. The ring should be there. I looked at the phone screen. Unknown caller. No caller ID. No area code I recognized. Who is this? I asked. Just check, please. The line went dead. I sat in the driver's seat for a full minute, staring at my phone, replaying the conversation in my head. The woman's voice had been desperate, pleading, like she was asking for something that mattered more than anything else in the world. Check her left hand. I got out of the driver's seat, walked around to the rear of the van, opened the doors. The body was there on the gurney, covered with a sheet. Everything as I'd left it. I pulled back the sheet from her upper body, looked at her hands. Her left hand rested across her chest. Pale, fingers slightly curled, and on her ring finger there was an indent, a clear depression in the skin, the kind of mark left by a ring worn for years, decades even, but there was no ring, no jewelry at all. The intake paperwork from the hospital confirmed it. No personal effects, no jewelry. I covered her again, closed the van doors, got back in the driver's seat. My phone rang again. Same unknown number. I answered immediately. Who is this? The same woman's voice. Did you check? There's no ring, I said. There's a mark where one used to be, but she's not wearing any jewelry. Someone took it, the woman said. Her voice broke. Someone took it before you got there. How do you know about this? How did you know I'd be transporting her? I've been looking for her, the woman said. For 3 years. I finally found her, and now she's gone. Are you family? I'm her daughter. I pulled up the case file on my tablet. No next of kin listed. No emergency contacts. The woman had been living alone. No visitors, no phone records indicating regular contact with anyone. Ma'am, the file says she had no family. She left, the daughter said. 15 years ago, changed her name, disappeared. I've been searching ever since. I hired investigators, checked hospitals, shelters, nothing. And now I find out she died 3 days ago and no one called me. How did you get this number? I called the hospital. They told me a transport company picked her up. I called every funeral home in Phoenix until I found the right one. They gave me your number. That didn't make sense. Dispatch wouldn't give out my personal cell. They'd transfer calls or take messages. What funeral home did you call? I asked. She gave me the name of our facility. They said you were handling the transport. They said you'd be on the road right now. They gave me your number. I'd have to check with dispatch later. That was a privacy violation. But right now, I needed to understand. Tell me about the ring, I said. It was my grandmother's, she said. Gold band, simple, engraved on the inside with my grandfather's initials. My mother never took it off, ever. She wore it for 40 years. If it's not with her, it might still be at her apartment. The police would have. It's not there. I already checked. I went to her apartment this afternoon after I found out she died. The landlord let me in. I searched everywhere. No ring. Someone took it. Maybe at the hospital. Maybe the paramedics. Maybe someone who found her before the authorities arrived. I looked back at the van, at the covered body in the rear. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, but I can't help with the ring. If you want to file a report about missing property, you should contact. Please, she said. Just tell me one thing. Was there a mark on her finger where the ring should have been? Yes, I said. There's a clear indent, like she'd been wearing a ring for a long time. She started crying, soft, choked sobs. Thank you. At least I know she kept wearing it, even after she left, even after everything. She kept wearing it. I'm very sorry, I said. If there's anything the funeral home can do to help you with arrangements. The line went dead again. I tried calling back. The number didn't connect, just a recorded message. The number you have dialed is not in service. I drove back to the funeral home, unloaded the body, completed the intake paperwork, documented everything, including the ring indent on her left hand. The next morning, I talked to dispatch, asked who had given out my cell number to a family member the previous night. We didn't give out any numbers, the dispatcher said. We don't do that. Privacy policy. A woman called me, said she got my number from our office. Not from us. Check your call log. Maybe it was a different caller. I pulled up my phone, checked the call history from the previous night. Unknown caller, 11:51 p.m. Duration, 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Unknown caller, 11:58 p.m. Duration, 4 minutes, 6 seconds. But when I tried to call the number back, I got the same message, not in service. I went to the prep room, found the intake file for the Jane Doe from the previous night. We'd since identified her through fingerprints. Her name was Margaret Solis, age 57, no listed family. I looked at the personal effects inventory. No jewelry, no ring, just the clothes she'd been wearing. But there was a note from the medical examiner, handwritten, added to the file that morning. Daughter came forward. Positive ID, next of kin, Claire Solis. I called the number listed for Claire Solis. It rang 4 times, went to voicemail. The voice on the recording was the same woman who'd called me the previous night. You've reached Claire. I can't answer right now. Please leave a message. I hung up. 2 days later, we held the funeral, small service. Just Claire and a few neighbors who'd known Margaret. I attended, stood in the back, watched. After the service, Claire approached me. You're the driver, she said. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for checking. About the ring. I nodded. I'm sorry I couldn't help more. You did, she said, knowing she still wore it. That mattered. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small velvet box, opened it. Inside was a gold ring. Simple, worn, engraved on the inside with initials I couldn't quite read. I found it, she said, at her apartment. It was in the bathroom on the sink. She must have taken it off to wash her hands. That's why she wasn't wearing it when they found her. I stared at the ring. But you said, I know what I said. But I was wrong. It was there all along. She closed the box. I called the funeral home that night, asked them to connect me with whoever was transporting her, but the receptionist said you were already on the road. No one gave me your number. Then how did you? I didn't call you, she said. I never called anyone that night. I didn't even know she'd been found until the next morning when the police contacted me. She looked at me for a long time. But someone called you, someone who knew about the ring, someone who wanted you to check. I couldn't speak. She touched my arm gently. Thank you for answering. Then she walked away. I never found out who called me that night. Never found a number to trace that never got an explanation. But I know this. Someone knew about that ring. Someone knew I was transporting Margaret Solis. Someone knew exactly what to ask me to check. And whoever it was, they weren't alive to make the call. I've seen vandalism at cemeteries before, but I've never seen weathering that defies time. My name is Marcus Walsh, and I have served as funeral director at Green Hill Memorial Gardens in Columbus, Ohio, for 18 years. I handle all aspects of funeral services, from intake to burial. I work with grieving families. I coordinate with clergy. I oversee groundskeeping, and I deal with the occasional vandalism that comes with maintaining a public cemetery. Spray paint on monuments, knocked over headstones, stolen flowers. We've seen it all. We file police reports, install cameras, repair the damage. It's unfortunate, but it happens. But what happened at Plot 112 wasn't vandalism. It was something else entirely. The burial took place on a Monday in April, male, 46 years old. Suicide, found in his car in a parking garage downtown. No note, no explanation, just a man who decided not to continue. His name was David Brennan, no spouse, no children. His parents were both deceased. A cousin came forward to handle arrangements, but she lived out of state and didn't attend the service. County-funded burial, minimal casket, no viewing, direct interment. I handled it personally, coordinated with the groundskeeper, ordered a temporary marker, simple aluminum plate with his name, dates, and plot number, standard procedure. The permanent stone would come later if the family chose to purchase one. The service was brief. Just me and a chaplain. We said a few words, lowered the casket, Filled the grave, placed the temporary marker. Plot 112, David Brennan, 1978 to 2024. I photographed the grave for our records, filed the paperwork, moved on to the next case. 3 weeks later, I was walking through the cemetery doing a routine inspection, checking for maintenance issues, making sure markers were secure, noting which graves needed attention. I passed plot 112 and stopped. Someone had carved a word into the temporary marker. Sorry. One word, etched deeply into the aluminum, not scratched, not spray painted, carved like someone had used a chisel or an engraving tool. I knelt down, examined it closely. The letters were crude but deliberate, about 2 inches tall, cut through the aluminum coating down to the bare metal underneath. But that's not what made me uneasy. The carving looked old. The exposed metal had oxidized, tarnished. The edges of the letters were weathered, like they'd been there for years, not days. I touched the letters. The oxidation wasn't surface level. It was deep, genuine aging, the kind of patina that takes years to develop, but the marker had only been in place for 3 weeks. I checked my phone, pulled up the photo I'd taken on the day of burial, zoomed in on the temporary marker. Clean, no carving, no damage. Someone had done this in the past 3 weeks. But the weathering was impossible. Aluminum doesn't oxidize that quickly, even in harsh conditions. Rain, snow, extreme heat. You don't get this level of corrosion in 3 weeks. You need years, decades sometimes. I called the groundskeeper, showed him the carving. Vandals, he said immediately. Probably kids. Look at the oxidation, I said. This looks like it's been here for 20 years. He examined it closely, ran his finger over the letters. That's weird. You're right. This metal is corroded, but I was just here last week trimming around this grave. I would have noticed this. Was it there? I don't remember seeing it, but I might not have looked closely. We checked the security cameras. Our system covers the main entrances and the chapel area, but not individual graves. Too expensive to monitor every plot. No footage of anyone approaching plot 112. No suspicious activity, just normal daily traffic. I filed a police report, took photographs, documented everything. An officer came out, looked at the carving, and shrugged. Probably happened at night, he said. Someone who knew the deceased. Maybe they felt guilty, wanted to leave a message. But the weathering could be a chemical treatment, make it look old, artificially age the metal. People do it for art projects all the time. That made sense. Sort of. Someone could have used chemicals to corrode the metal, make it look aged. But why? Why go through that effort for a single word on a temporary grave marker? I ordered a replacement marker, had the damaged one removed, installed the new one myself. Clean, unmarked, same information. Plot 112. David Brennan. 2 weeks later, the word was back. Sorry. Same location on the marker, same crude letters, same impossible weathering. I stood there staring at it. The new marker had been in place for 14 days. 2 weeks, and it already showed years of oxidation around the carved letters. I took photographs, compared them to the previous carving. The letters were identical, not similar, identical. Same size, Same positioning, same depth, like someone had used the exact same template, the exact same tool, carved the exact same word in the exact same way. I didn't file another police report. I didn't call the groundskeeper. I just stood there looking at that word. Sorry. Who was sorry? David Brennan? Was this a message he'd left somehow? But he'd been dead for 5 weeks. He couldn't carve anything. Or was it someone else? Someone who felt guilty about his death? Someone who couldn't say it while he was alive? I checked our visitor logs. We ask people to sign in when they enter the cemetery. Not required, but encouraged. I looked through the entries for the past month. No one had signed in to visit Plot 112. I decided to watch the grave. I set up a trail with camera 20 feet away, hidden behind a large monument. Motion activated, night vision capable. If anyone approached that grave, I'd have footage. I checked the camera every morning for a week. Nothing, no visitors, no movement. The grave sat undisturbed. On the 8th day, I checked the marker. The word was still there. Sorry, weathered and old. But something had changed. There was a second word now, below the first. Forgive. Same carving style, same weathering, same impossible oxidation. I reviewed the trail camera footage, scrubbed through every second of recording. From the past 8 days, nothing. No one had approached the grave. The camera had captured deer, raccoons, a groundskeeper mowing nearby, but no one had touched Plot 112, yet the word was there. Forgive. Carved deep, aged decades and days. I pulled David Brennan's file, looked below his intake paperwork, cause of death, suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning, found in his car, no note, no explanation, but there was a detail in the police report I hadn't noticed before. He'd been found in a parking garage, level 3, the same parking garage where his wife had died in a car accident 7 years earlier. I called the cousin who'd handled the arrangements, asked her about David's wife. Emma, she said, car accident, 2017. They'd been married 3 years. David never recovered. He blamed himself. Why would he blame himself? They'd had a fight that morning. Something stupid. She left angry, wasn't paying attention, hit a support column at high speed. David always thought if he hadn't fought with her, she would have been more careful. Did he ever forgive himself? Long silence. No, he spent 7 years carrying that guilt. I think that's why he chose that parking garage. Same level, same spot. I thanked her, hung up. I went back to Plot 112, stood looking at the marker. Sorry, forgive. 2 words, carved impossibly, weathered beyond explanation. And I understood. This wasn't vandalism. This wasn't a message from someone living. This was a conversation between the dead. David was sorry, had been sorry for 7 years, sorry he fought with Emma, sorry he blamed himself, sorry he couldn't let go, and someone, something, was answering. Forgive. I left the marker alone, didn't replace it, didn't report it, just documented it, photographed it, filed it away. The words are still there. Sorry. Forgive. Carved deep into aluminum that's only been in the ground for 2 months, but looks like it's been there for decades. I check it every week. The words don't change, don't fade, just sit there, weathered and permanent. A question and an answer. a guilt that outlasted life, and a forgiveness that transcends death. I don't know who carved those words. I don't know how the metal aged so quickly. I don't know if David Brennan can rest now, but I know this: some apologies take longer to deliver than a lifetime, and some are finally heard when it's too late to matter to the living, but not too late to matter at all. I've closed over 600 mouths in my career, and I've never felt one breathe back. My name is Nina Castellano, and I have worked as a licensed embalmer at Riverside Memorial Chapel in Raleigh, North Carolina for 9 years. My job requires precision, attention to detail, respect for the deceased. Every body I prepare receives the same care, the same dignity, regardless of circumstance. I set features, position hands, close eyes and mouths, apply cosmetics, dress them in their final clothes, make them look peaceful, make them look like themselves, give families one last moment to say goodbye without seeing death's harsh reality. It's technical work, scientific. There's no room for superstition or fear. Dead tissue doesn't move, doesn't breathe, doesn't respond. Until the night I prepared Catherine Morgan and felt her exhale against my fingers. She came to us on a Wednesday. Female, 68 years old, heart failure, found deceased in her apartment by a home health aide who'd come for a scheduled visit. The aide said Catherine had been dead for at least 8 days. The smell had been noticeable from the hallway. The medical examiner confirmed it. 8 days, significant decomposition, but not too far gone for a closed casket service. The family wanted a viewing, wanted to say goodbye. That meant I needed to restore her as much as possible. I've handled worse cases. 8 days in a climate controlled apartment isn't ideal, but it's manageable. I can work with that. Fill sunken features, address discoloration, set expression, make her presentable. She arrived at our facility Thursday evening. I started the intake process immediately. Photographs, documentation, assessment of condition. She'd been a small woman, thin, gray hair cut short. Her face showed the typical signs of post-mortem change: discoloration, tissue breakdown, but her expression was peaceful, her mouth slightly open, her eyes closed. I began the embalming process. Arterial injection, drainage, chemical preservation, standard procedure. The fluids took well. Her tissue responded normally, good saturation, even distribution. After embalming, I started facial restoration. This is where the artistry comes in, rebuilding features that have sunken or collapsed, using tissue builder, cotton, support structures, making her look like she did in life. I worked on her face for 2 hours, rebuilt her cheeks, set her eyes properly, applied base cosmetics, positioned her jaw. The final step is sealing the mouth. I use a special adhesive. Apply it to the inner lips. Press them together gently but firmly. Hold for 30 seconds to ensure proper adhesion. Then I check the expression. Make sure it looks natural, peaceful. I applied the adhesive to Catherine's lips, positioned her jaw carefully, pressed her lips together. That's when I felt it. Warm air against my fingers, soft, brief, like an exhale. I pulled my hand back, stared at her face. Her lips were closed, her expression unchanged, but I'd felt it: warmth, movement, breath. I told myself it was decomposition gas. Bodies release gases, even embalmed bodies. Pressure can build in tissue, can escape through the mouth or nose. It's normal, expected, but decomposition gas is cold, or room temperature, not warm, not to body temperature. I checked her mouth, opened it slightly. No unusual buildup of gas, no pressure, nothing that would explain what I'd felt. I reapplied the adhesive, positioned her lips again, pressed them together. It happened again, warmer this time, more pronounced, like someone breathing out slowly. I stepped back from the table, looked at her, really looked. She'd been dead for 8 days, embalmed, no circulation, no brain activity, no respiratory function. Dead bodies don't breathe. I checked for a pulse anyway, pressed my fingers to her carotid artery. Nothing. Her skin was cool, firm, definitely deceased. I checked the embalming report. Full arterial, complete drainage, chemical preservation confirmed. She was embalmed, thoroughly, properly, but I'd felt breath. Twice, I decided to continue. Finished setting her lips. This time I held them closed longer, 60 seconds instead of 30, waiting to feel it again. Nothing, just cool, still flesh under my fingers. I completed the rest of the preparation, dressed her in the clothing the family provided, positioned her in the casket, did final cosmetic touch-ups. She looked good, peaceful, like herself. I closed the prep room at midnight, went home, couldn't sleep, kept feeling that warm air against my fingers, that impossible exhale. The viewing was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. I came in early to do final checks. Opened the casket, examined her face. Everything looked perfect. Her lips were properly sealed, her expression peaceful. I touched her cheek, cool, firm, normal for an embalmed body. Then I noticed something, a tiny gap between her lips. Not much, maybe a millimeter, but they'd separated slightly. The adhesive had failed. That happens sometimes. Temperature changes, tissue settling. The seal can break. I'd have to reapply. I got fresh adhesive, leaned over the casket, positioned her lips, applied the compound, pressed them together. The breath was stronger this time, warm, sustained, 3 full seconds of exhalation against my palm. I jerked my hand away, looked at her face. Her lips were closed, sealed, but I'd felt it. Undeniable, impossible. I stood there shaking. This wasn't decomposition gas. This wasn't tissue settling. This was breath, warm, deliberate, like someone slowly exhaling. I checked the room temperature, 68 degrees, normal. I checked my hands. My fingers were cold, but the breath I'd felt had been warm. Body temperature, 98 degrees. I called my supervisor, told her I needed a second opinion. She came down to the prep room, looked at Catherine, examined my work. "What's the problem?" she asked. "I keep feeling breath when I seal her lips." She looked at me. Breath, warm air against my fingers, like she's exhaling. My supervisor checked the body, opened Catherine's mouth, examined the airway, checked for gas buildup, found nothing. "It's probably just pressure equalizing," she said. "Temperature differential. Your hands are cold. The tissue is relatively warmer, creates a sensation of warmth." I've been doing this for 9 years, I said. I know what gas feels like. This is different. She didn't argue, just closed the casket. The viewing starts in 3 hours. She looks good. Leave it alone. I wanted to explain, wanted to make her understand, but I just nodded. The family arrived at 2 p.m. 20 people, children, grandchildren, close friends. They gathered around the casket, cried, shared memories, said their goodbyes. I stood in the back of the viewing room, watching, making sure everything went smoothly. At one point, Catherine's daughter approached me. She was crying, holding a tissue. Thank you, she said. She looks so peaceful, like she's sleeping. I'm glad we could help, I said. She touched my arm. Can I ask you something? Of course. When you were preparing her, did you notice anything unusual? My heart stopped. What do you mean? It's silly, but my mother was always so particular about her appearance. She hated having her mouth open. Always said if she died, make sure her mouth was closed. She was adamant about it. I made sure it was closed, I said. I know, but here's the thing. When I was little, she used to put me to bed every night. She'd kiss my forehead and then breathe out slowly, like a sigh. She said it was her way of giving me peace, breathing her calmness into me. She paused, wiped her eyes. I know this sounds crazy, but when I was standing by the casket just now, I swear I felt it. That breath, that slow exhale, like she was doing it one more time, giving me peace. I couldn't speak. She smiled through her tears. I know it's impossible, but it made me feel better, like she was saying goodbye. She walked back to the casket, rejoined her family. I stood there, thinking about what she'd said, about the breath I'd felt 3 times, warm, deliberate, impossible, and I realized something. It wasn't a malfunction. It wasn't decomposition gas. It wasn't my imagination. It was Catherine giving peace one last time to me, to her daughter, to anyone who needed it. A final gift, a final breath, a final goodbye. The viewing ended at 5 p.m. We closed the casket, prepared Catherine for burial. The service was Monday morning, graveside, simple, beautiful. I didn't attend. I'd already said my goodbye. I've prepared dozens of bodies since then, all routine, all normal. No unusual sounds, no impossible sensations. But I remember Catherine. I remember that breath, warm against my fingers, gentle, deliberate, the last thing she had to give, and she gave it freely to her daughter, to me, to anyone who would receive it. Peace in the form of a breath, and I carry it with me still.